Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers. To hear that, words have voices. Our host for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest, my unbelievable guest, is Mr. FrankMcCourt, the author of Angela's Ashes and now Tez. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Teresa.
It's so wonderful of you to be in Oklahoma. Have you ever been to Oklahoma before?
Never.
What's your first impression as you were flying in? What
It's
did you
flat.
It's flat.
God, it goes on forever.
It does go
I
on
think
forever.
of those wagons crossing the prairies. Jesus, they were brave.
Yes, it must
Probably
have.
your ancestors.
Probably.
On one side there were your ancestors, on the other side your other ancestors were attacking them.
You know, I think
Yeah,
that's a good
And they had
possibility.
to circle the wagons. So you must feel very schizophrenic.
I am a little
If
conflicted.
if you were to go back 100 years, you wouldn't know whether to defend or attack.
You know, that's a
Yeah.
good analysis, and you know, I'll need to remember that as we
Yeah.
go on. Listen, you're in a wonderful position right now with your career, all the acclaim. Does that seem real to you?
No, it's beyond anything. Chinese say, be careful what you ask for, you might get it. But I never even, I never asked for this. I wrote a book, Angela's Ashes, and I didn't know it was going to be. I didn't know it was going to be published, first of all. And then when it was published, I didn't know it was going to get on the bestseller list. I had no idea. When I was a teacher in New York City, I'd ride the subways and read the New York Times, book reviews, Sunday book reviews, and live in a state of envy of all those writers who were doing what they wanted to do. When I was teaching in what they call inner city high school, whatever the hell that means. And it was, teaching is hard, as you know. And I dreamed of the writing life, but I never thought I'd achieve it. Then I retired, and I wrote Angela's Ashes, and it got out of hand altogether.
You know, I was thinking about that book the other night. When I read it, it was a very moving, emotional experience for me. And I was trying to think about how that must have felt for you writing that book. Was that a painful experience for you, reliving some of those memories?
It was, especially when I thought of my mother's life, how hard it was, because it wasn't until I started writing that I began to realize really how hard her life was. The intensity of her suffering. I knew it all along, but she was alive. She died in 1981. I knew she'd had a hard time, but I didn't dig in. I hadn't dug in. And then I wrote it, and it becomes successful. And there are times when I think, there were many times when I wasn't exactly considerate or kind. I used to get irritated with her. And you'd want to bring her back again and make up for it, but it's too late. So if there's a message, and I don't really give messages, is be kind to your mother on other days besides Mother's Day.
Has that affected your life in an emotional way? Do you find yourself reacting to other people that are with you now a little differently because you've written this book?
Well, it's easy. It's almost self-indulgent to look back and say, oh, I'm sorry I wasn't more kind and more considerate. But the only lesson is that what am I doing now that I might regret later on? So I have to, from time to time, I have to pull myself up and say, that you're being irritable, you're being mean, you're being short-tempered. We all are, but now I've become more aware of it. I don't want to have the regrets that I had over my mother.
I think that's a very fine point and a very fine lesson that you've learned from the experience of writing. That's the teacher in you coming out. You learn from process.
Well, I learned a lot while I was teaching. You know, that if you're standing in front of the classroom and you're talking about, you can read Hamlet, and you can read it and read and read. But it isn't until you start talking about it and discussing it with people, and especially with high school seniors, that you learn. You don't understand it. You can be a scholar all your life and sit in and study Shakespeare, write about Shakespeare, but there's nothing like talking to American adolescents about it, because you get criticism straight from the shoulder.
Yeah, they want to go back to the Cliff Note version, right?
No, they don't. No, they don't really, because what I've discovered as a teacher is they demand honesty. They're often dishonest themselves, and they cheat. You want to get through these exams, but in the classroom, in discussions, they want honesty. They want honesty from you and me, from their parents, and I'm afraid they rarely get it, because what they get is, well, when I was in school, I did this, and you wouldn't want to inquire too closely into people's school records. And kids are browbeaten, but they do want the honesty. And for me, in my case, I learned to say, I don't know, or what do you think, in English classes. I learned a lot.
That's really a courageous statement, isn't it, to say, I don't know?
It is, and especially when you have kids. You think when you say you don't know that the kids are going to zero in on you and pick you apart, but they don't. They say, well, you're the English teacher, you're supposed to know. Well, I don't know everything. This English literature, American literature, and your literature is immense. How can I know everything? If we discuss a poem, well, what does it mean? I don't know. What do you think it means? So that's how it went. I said I would just get the discussion going.
There's not a computer program for teaching in
There's
that
no
way.
computer program for that, no. Despite what Al Gore says, put a laptop in every lap. There's no substitute for teachers.
You had a unique experience recently in that you went to Colorado after the Columbine incident. What was that like for you?
I've done a lot of talking and reading in the last 3 years, but that was the one that gave me pause. I didn't even think I should go. And I told my wife that, and we called the people there in Denver, and I said, no, I don't think I'll come because of what you've been through. Oh, they said, come. So when I went, and then there was a big lunch. There was a coalition of business and education, and I didn't know what to say. I said, I can't say anything that other people haven't already said. And I got up and I talked about teaching, the way we're talking now, and I talked about high school teaching kids and what I learned and the funny moments. And they laughed and they said I'd done the right thing. Everybody goes through there, talks about the tragedy, but I couldn't do that because I've grown up with enough deaths in my family and in my neighbors. So, and what we would do, in our response to death was to have a wake, sing.
And, you know, that comes throughout Angela's Ashes because in spite of the losses that you sustained, and I must tell you, I felt like a member of the McCourt family, even though I'm a Cherokee. I thought, you know, I feel like one of the McCourts, and yet there was always a smile, there was always a laughter, even when you were going into the confessional, and you know, how long has it been since your last confession? What had it been, just a few minutes?
But 1 minute.
1 minute, and you were going in again?
Well, you can't succumb completely to gloom, because you know some people take death very seriously, and really it's the most absurd experience of all. I know it's painful. We are. If anybody member of my family died, I'd grieve. I'll cry into my pint of Guinness because I don't go along with this stuff where they have a gathering and say, "Oh well, we're not here to grieve. We're here to celebrate a life." Well, you go celebrate the life. I have to have my grieving time. And then maybe later on we celebrate the life. But you can't get over the pain. And I know people who've dealt with the pain through cocaine, drugs, alcohol, and so on. But sooner or later it catches up with you, and you pay the price. So you might as well grieve.
Grieve and then go on.
Then go on.
Then go on and have your
and
laughter.
Don't make a phony statement about, oh, we're celebrating a life. Yeah, all right, go ahead. Do it on your own time.
And that's what you did in Angela's Ashes.
Yeah.
Tell us again about the title and what that signifies to you.
I intended to, when I started writing this book, I think the title was one of the first things that came to me, because we had cremated my mother and taken her ashes to Ireland 4 years after she died. And I was going to write this book and bring it all the way from my earliest memories up to my mother's death when we took her ashes back. But I started writing it, and the story was that I was born in New York, taken to Ireland when I was 3 or 4, and at 19 I left and came back to the States. And my editor said, and I agreed, there's your book, you can go write another one. But I had the title. No, she didn't really say, no, you can go another one. I had the title, and I didn't want to let it go. It really doesn't have much to do with the book. Now there are professors and high school English teachers examining, going after the meaning. They say, it was the ashes my mother looked at in the fire. It's the ashes from the cigarettes that killed her. or her four sons are the ashes that she rose from, like the phoenix. All kinds of academic interpretations. It keeps the professors busy, keeps them off the streets.
Well, and they need help, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Well, you've
so
made
that's what the title really belongs to the second book.
Well, I think it's a lovely title. And speaking of the second book, it is out now. Did you have a plan from the beginning to go ahead and write the second book? Was your editor's idea that?
No, not really. It was just a vague idea. The reason I wrote the second book, Tis, is that I wanted to show the effects of. I wanted to continue the story and show the effects of growing up in those circumstances. You grow up in poverty, you grow up with a strange kind of education, and the domination of the church. And I want to show what it was like coming to New York, ill-equipped as I was, ill-educated, unprepossessing, timid, tentative, angry, the way people are when they're poor. I want to show what that was like, how difficult it is to get off the boat and make your way into American society. And the only advantage I had was the language. I can't think what it would be like to come here from Bulgaria or Romania or Germany or Italy. It must be very difficult when you don't have the language.
You noted that you were ill-educated, and yet when critics talk about your work, they universally say what wonderful style you have.
Yeah.
What mentors did you have? Do people stand out in your mind as being mentors to you and helping you learn the craft of language and style, or is that just a gift you have?
30 years of teaching. These were my mentors. When you're teaching, you have to speak the speech like Hamlet, speak the speech, I pray thee. You have to be direct, you have to be honest. As I said, they demand honesty. And of course, as soon as I opened my mouth, they detected some kind of an accent.
It's hard to understand. People get one from me too.
They do,
I don't understand.
They say they want to know where you're from, and then their curiosity creates a bridge. So in my case, they'd ask me about Ireland and what it was like, and I'd start telling them some of the things that were in Angela's Ashes, and the kids from the next year would come and say, "Oh, you told the story last year. What's that story?" And I would tell that story again, and I was writing the book. I didn't know then I was writing the book. I thought I was teaching. They thought I was teaching. I was learning, and maybe I was writing at the time. And that's where the style came from, because I would insist in their writing on simplicity and clarity.
Do you get back to Ireland a lot?
Lately, yeah, a lot.
You were telling me about the ring that you wear a moment ago, and it's a very...
the Claddagh ring.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, Claddagh is a part of the west of Ireland, and this ring has a crown on top, and it has two hands holding this heart. And if the heart is pointing at you, that means you're taken. If I were to reverse this and go out into the streets of Oklahoma, it would indicate that I was available.
Oh, okay.
Come on, girls, here I am.
And I bet there would be a lot in line.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, with all of this acclaim, and now there's a motion picture being made about Angela's Ashes.
It's done.
How do you feel about it?
It's finished. I saw it.
It's
fantastic.
Does that give you a whole new insight into the book?
No, it's just you watch the movie, and you know the camera, the room wasn't exactly like that, or the bedroom, but that's all right. But I was sitting there with only four of us in this screening theater in New York, and sometimes I felt myself being drawn into the screen, or that I was being surrounded by my. It's an eerie sensation. I don't know of anybody else who's written a memoir and had it published and then had a movie made of it and saw the movie. It's like looking at yourself in a mirror.
I wondered about that, about the actors who play your family. Was that a strange transition for you?
Well,
or were they believable to you?
They believe, yeah. Emily Watson, she's an English actress, and she's fantastic, and Robert Carlyle. And there are 3 kids playing me at different stages of my 6, 10, and 16.
Oh, that must be an incredible sensation too.
They're local Irish kids, but it's incredible. It's opening on Christmas Day, as far as I know.
Well, I look forward to seeing it, and of course we want to talk about your new book, Tis, which is just out. Was it hard to think in terms of following up the success of Angela's Ashes, or was this a book you just knew you had to write at that point?
I knew I had to write it. I knew I wanted to write it, but it was much harder to write than Angela's Ashes, because I wrote Angela's Ashes mostly in a little house in Pennsylvania since I retired from teaching. And it's, you know, it's one locality, it's Limerick, and it's one culture, and told from the point of view of a child, a growing child. But Tiz is New York, and a greater cast of characters, and I tried to capture the rhythm of New York talk, different ethnic types, the army, menial jobs, New York University, and then teaching. And then, of course, in there is my family, my mother, and the struggles that my mother had when she came to the States. So there's a large cast of characters, and it was difficult to write because I've been traveling since Angela's Ashes was published. So I wrote Tiz on the road in airplanes and buses and trains and ships, everywhere. And I don't remember writing it.
I wonder, though, when you look at certain scenes that are very poignant in the book, or in Angela's Ashes, can you remember where you were when you wrote some of those scenes that touch our hearts so deeply and are very
In Angela's
emotional?
Ashes? Oh, yeah,
Or
no.
in Tiz, where you were when you were that day, you wrote that scene or that passage and you knew that was right.
There were days, you know, if you're writing a memoir like that and you're talking about a family and adversity, there are days you don't even want to sit down and do it. You find every excuse. I have a headache. I need time off. You give yourself an excuse. You go for coffee. You go for a walk. So there were days I didn't want to.
How long did it take you to write Tiz?
Tiz? I started scribbling after Angela's Ashes was published in September of '96, and then I finished it early this year. I think February 1999.
Was it harder for you also stylistically in terms of the crafting of the sentences? Do you have to do revisions?
Oh, I always revise, yeah. I write in a notebook. I write it in longhand in composition books. And then I sit down and tap it into the computer. And that's the revision. That's where the editing takes place. There's nothing, the most brilliant invention of modern times is the cursor, or the little delete thing. The delete is the writer's best friend.
Do you have anyone who reads early drafts of your manuscripts?
No. I would read parts to my wife.
And does she to get actively involved in?
No. She knows. That's her wisdom. I think one time when I was writing Angela's Ashes, she made a suggestion. I resisted it, but she was right. And I made I forget what the revision was, but she was right. But otherwise she doesn't say anything. She knows, she's not intrusive.
And so you know if she does say something that really means something and is significant. Tell us what to expect in Tiz for those of us who haven't read it. What are some things that we are going to learn along with you, because I'm sure that you learned it.
It's an immigrant story. It's the clash of cultures, somebody arriving in America, as all of our ancestors did, and except for yours, maybe some of yours. And I think it's a story of bewilderment, or the gradual emerging from bewilderment. You come to New York, which is the most awesome city in the world for somebody like me anyway, 19 years old, with no skills, no self-esteem whatsoever.
It had been a hard trip. It had been a hard trip, I imagine.
Well, it was 9 days at sea. It wasn't that hard. This is what I tried to make my way, not knowing what to do with myself. This was the land of my dreams, the golden land. The Chinese call it the Golden Mountain. And I had this dream of I'd walk up Fifth Avenue and dance up like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Everything would be wonderful and golden. I'd go out at night time and top hat and tails.
And that didn't happen?
It didn't happen, no. What I got, I immediately got into all kinds of, I couldn't find anything but these menial jobs as a labourer. But I was drafted into the army. That saved me.
How saved you?
Well, I was sent to my 16 weeks of basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, for infantry. Then sent to Germany, where they stuck me in the Canine Corps, training German Shepherds.
Now that must not have been an easy job.
That was not my plan.
No, I can't imagine a life plan.
I said to the captain, "But sir, I don't like dogs." And he said, "Who asked you?" So you just do what you're told.
How did you train them? How do you go about
Well,
it? Particularly if you don't like them.
Well, you're assigned to one dog, and I had my dog, and we got used to each other. And then they yanked me from that, and they sent me to company clerk school, where I learned to type, and that was another advantage. So, and then when I came out, they had made the GI Bill available, the Korean version of the GI Bill, and that, even though I didn't have a high school diploma, that enabled me to. I went to New York University. I talked my way into New York University.
How did you talk your way in?
Well, I told them I was very intelligent. Though I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that I was capable of, but I was so desperate, and I really was a timid soul. I was not assertive, but I was so desperate. I wanted to get off these jobs working in the docks and warehouse, and I just went in and told them that I'd read all kinds of books. And that they admitted me in a year's probation. I'd been in the army, I had the GI Bill, It wasn't what they call life experience, because they were very rigid about their requirements in those days. So I was able to maintain that B average and matriculate and then graduate and become a teacher.
What did you want to study when you first went there and were talking your way into school? Did you have any plans at that point, or did you want everything?
Books, literature, philosophy, religion, everything.
What literature did you like to read?
Well, English. I love English literature, and I love 19th century American literature. So I love I'm not saying this because I'm in Oklahoma. The West was always present in our lives in Ireland. The movies, and then all these the novels, the Zane Grey and everything, and this was always this dreamland, the openness of it. I mean, I came to New York, and New York closed in on me, I think, but if everybody has had this notion you can go west, young man.
Yes.
The far horizons. Everybody has had this. So that's all this American stuff was ingrained in us.
Can you think of any particular pieces of literature that have influenced you the most? That you keep coming back to? They're touchstones for you.
I'll tell you what I did when I came here and arrived in the hotel. I immediately went for the Bible, the King James Bible.
Is there any special part of the Bible?
Yeah, the Song of Solomon. I love it. It's pure poetry and it's so erotic. Sitting alone in the hotel room out there reading the King James Bible, but it's the most glorious piece of literature. Although when I grew up in Ireland, we were practically forbidden to read the Bible, and we were actually definitely forbidden to read the King James Bible. The Douay Bible was the Catholic Bible.
Right.
So, but in later years, then I discovered the King James Bible, and I'm not particularly religious, but the rhythms and the stories and the magnificence of the language, that's what keeps me going.
You know, Virginia Woolf said something very interesting once. Someone asked her about her writer's block, and she said, well, she learned for her that the most important thing was rhythm, that if you had the right rhythms, the words would come. Would you agree with that?
The voice and the rhythm. If you have the voice, which it took me a long time to discover when I was writing Angel's Ashes. I didn't know. When I started it, the first 19 or 20 pages are not written from the viewpoint, from the perspective of a child. They're done in the usual ubiquitous narrator in the past tense. But then I just stumbled on the perspective, because I said to myself one day, I was writing in the chair, and I said, I'm going to go back to my earliest memories. And I made a note on the left page about what I would write tomorrow, going back to my earliest memories from the child. And I said, I'm sitting in I'm in a playground in Brooklyn with my brother Malachi. He's 2, I'm 3. We're on the seesaw, up, down, up. Malachi goes up, I go down, I get off, and Malachi comes down and bites his tongue. And that was it. That felt very comfortable, that perspective. And then the rhythms, the particular rhythms of a child's language, and I kept that going till I was 19 in the book.
What has been your family's reaction to this book?
Oh,
or both books?
They're all, unless they're talking behind my back, they're all patting me on the back.
And is it strange to you, because we all feel like we know you so well? We know your family, we know your brothers, we know your brother, we know your background. Is that kind of familiarity comfortable for you?
Oh, well, with all the years in the classroom, kids asking me questions.
Oh, that's
it's all
true.
right with it. And then, there are two schools of thought about that. Tell them nothing. The old timer, tell them nothing, you're the teacher. You have a private life. And then the others, there's another philosophy says, participate. Tell them, you can tell them something. Why keep any secret? If you're urging them to write about themselves, to write in an autobiographical sense and to dig into their families and their experiences, they have a right to ask you a few questions too.
Absolutely. Do you ever think of going into fiction, doing any fiction?
Yeah, I'm thinking of it. That's the next step, but I don't know what tack it will take. All kinds of ideas are swirling around. The first line of a novel came to my head, and it is, Murnaghan made a list. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Or what's going to be on the list?
I don't know what's going to be on that list.
Do you keep lists?
I do.
Okay,
I'm a big man for keeping lists.
I have lists everywhere, and then I like to cross off each thing when I do.
Well,
It's for
everything.
pleasure.
If I were to write down the name of a street in Limerick or New York or Philadelphia, it would bring back a memory. Otherwise, that's you can do that. That's what I think anybody can do. That as far as memory is concerned, sit for a while and make lists, and the lists one thing will lead to another.
Mr. McCourt, we have just a few seconds here. What would you like us to take away from you and your work and from your family?
I think I'm at this stage of my life, having retired from teaching and have ignored all the stuff in America about how once you're over 45 you're finished. I'm the great hope of the Social Security set. Arise from your wheelchairs and write your memoirs.
Thank you, Frank, for being here.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.